Darn it.
Hello, everyone. Let's throw that intro up. Oh, oh. And welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to the NASEF Scholastic Esports Academy podcast. It's very exciting to be here again. We have some new friends, some old friends, and as always, some amazing human beings that are doing incredible things. So just to frame our conversation today, we spent the last few episodes really diving into what is Scholastic Esports, digging into some of the basics around cultivating your community and how to get started, and some considerations around best practices as well as some potential pitfalls when you are starting a Scholastic-based esports program. But today's focus is really around game titles. This seems to be obviously a big question from those that are jumping into the space. What game titles do I choose? How do I know the differences between the game titles? What's actually appropriate in the Scholastic space? And then really, how do I get the students engaged, either to compete within the titles or maybe even just consider it as more of a casual opportunity to engage them as well. So we brought together some leaders in the field, primarily from our Scholastic Fellow community. So before we get started, I would like to just give a round of introductions. So my name is Jarrell Batak. I am the Chief Operating Officer for NASEF, and I'm joined here by, please jump in.
James, you're first. Yeah.
All right, I'll go first because we're clockwise, I suppose. So
Yeah.
I'm James Wood. I work with NASEF as their Scholastic Tournament Administrator. Right now, my primary focus is working with the California CIF Esports, as well as working on the NASEF Finals, along with one of our other podcasters here tonight. I also run the Western Region Middle School Esports Conference, myself, JD, and another teacher in charge of that, which is a middle school esports league.
That's hard to follow up. Hi, my name is Pamela Moreno. I am actually a New York City teacher who joined NASEF last year as a fellow, and this year I'm a mentor. I've been working on trying to implement an actual working program within the NYC DOE. That's what I've been working on for the past few years. And at the moment, I've piloted a program through SYP, which is Summer Youth Employment Program, as well as the Work Learn Group, and having students earn the opportunity to get paid to be somewhat of a managers for an esports team.
Hi, I'm JD Williams. I'm a technology instructional coach in the Levine Elementary School District. It's a K-8 district in South Phoenix with around 8,000 students, and we have 3 different esports competitive teams at our district. And I'm also a NASEF fellow, mentor, community leader. And like James said before, we want to run the Western Conference Middle School Esports League, Western Region Middle School Esports League, that has different teams from the Pacific and Mountain Standard Times in middle school.
Hi, I'm Amy Haynes. Following a great group. I teach CTE Computer Science in Mexico, Missouri. I'm also in my 8th year of doing esports at my school. Additionally, I'm on the board of directors for the Missouri Scholastic Esports Federation, and this year I'm a Scholastic mentor for NASEF.
Did you say 8th year?
I did. I did. Just started year 8.
8th year. That's a veteran in this space. We should be bowing down. You've been in this space much
Either
longer
that
than
or calling
any of
someone
us.
for me. I don't know.
Well, thank you for the introductions. As always, it's always super exciting to engage with our national and now international community of educational leaders in this space. I mean, just on this podcast alone, we have California, Georgia, New York, Missouri, and Arizona represented. So it's always great to have that representation in all of these spaces. So, like I said, our topic today is really jumping into game titles. So what I want to do is maybe kind of set the foundation and the floor for our conversation, and really help our audience and all the viewers out there kind of start with understanding what are the different categories and genres of some of those potential esports titles. And I do want to make it specific to, what's in the esports industry that's popular, right? And the differentiation between the titles that we choose for Scholastic Esports. So as always, open conversation. We could just jump right in. If you have any thoughts, please feel free to contribute.
Well, I will jump in on this for running middle school groups. There's a few different, I would say, genres of what we're looking at. The big distinction, what I would say, would be between shooters and not shooters is kind of the two biggest categories that most things fall in. And that's usually the first question that comes up with most districts. We could get into some of the more granular, is it what we consider a MOBA or an action-paced game or a sports title? In the Scholastic space, though, probably the most popular games are non-shooter titles and emphasis on free and cross-platform. So starting with those two.
Yeah, definitely in the elementary through middle school space, we don't play anything that's ESRB rated T or above. So everything's E for everyone. Rocket League, super popular. Chess is popular. Knockout City. A lot of those games that are, like James said, free to play, cross-platform. Super Smash Brothers, that I think is the only one that we are in that's not cross-platform. That's super popular.
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of challenges with what is accessible, and I think accessibility is one of the biggest key factors here.
I'll have to echo you guys. In middle school, one of the games we do play is Rocket League, and like James said, it's what's accessible. And Rocket League it's a game that uses minimal graphics, and it's free and it's cross-platform. So it makes it very easy to choose games that people are already playing. Looking at games that are very popular, that our kids are familiar with, and also when it comes to middle school is really considering whether you want to go in the route of shooter games. I know that people think of games like Fortnite, Valorant, and Apex, and they look at it and they see it as those are sort of cartoonish in a sense. It's not really realistic games, but they still offer the same sense of what other games are, other shooter games are. So when it comes to middle school, I try my hardest to steer clear of games like that and go towards like JD said, chess or Minecraft and Rocket League. Those are games we focus on.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Same for us at the middle school level. We do Smash and Rocket League regularly, and then we have chess and Mario Kart sometimes. But we try to keep it accessible, but also we use our Switches a lot. But yeah, the younger kids, we don't let them get into the T for Teen games.
Yeah. So if you're not familiar already with the ESRB ratings, that's kind of one of the default starting spots. Is you're looking for ratings that are usually either E for everyone, E10 plus, or you're looking at something that's maybe like T for teen. In some cases, when you get into the high school space. So unfortunately, there's a lot of schools that will immediately just nope on any title that is considered a shooter. We have schools that are even pushing back on things like Splatoon, which is probably the most cartoonified shooter that's out there. And so some of our leagues have looked into alternatives that will still kind of scratch that first-person shooter itch, which is why some of us are gravitating towards Knockout City. It's a dodgeball based game, and it does allow for a similar style of experience without actually being classified as a shooter.
So I do want to dive into a couple points that were made here, and really kind of explore deeper around the considerations. We're talking about equity and access, free to play and cross play. Can any of you expand upon that and explain to our community around why that's important for equity and access for our students and young people?
Well, really, it comes down to devices, like what the games are available on and what devices you have access to in your school or organization. So there really isn't like a good answer to that because it's really almost individualized at each place. Like some of the games, like chess and Minecraft, are available on Chromebooks, so that works. Those other games a lot of them are cross-platform, but do they need like something with a dedicated graphics card, which a lot of school settings might not have? So then you're trying to figure out where to get the things to actually run the game. And then some of it is just based off of if you're a competitive or casual, like if your group's casual, you're playing different games. If it's competitive, you kind of have to go with what the competitive scene is in your middle school or high school, like what games they're playing competitively. I know here in Arizona, they play League of Legends, and Rocket League is really the only thing that's competitive that our Interscholastic Athletics Association uses. So it can really depend on where your program's at and where you want it to be, and what the one thing I didn't say is like what students are interested in, which should also always be one of the things. But if it's competitive, you're kind of siloed into those specific games.
And I would have to say the same thing. When I sent out a survey or anything like that for my students, the games that they listed that they were interested in, it's not really, for some of them, are the games that usually you would see in competitive gaming. So it's trying to figure out a way to make it work and find games that are kind of the same, around the same route, so that they can participate in that as well. But like JD said, it's all about devices. And when you take a look at computers, something, especially after the pandemic, computers, something that a lot of schools invest in. And if not, Chromebooks or iPads have been given to students, or anything to support their learning. So you have games like Minecraft, which is accessible in all platforms, phones, iPads, tablets, anything like that. So these are things that they can participate and play different types of games as well, and participate in esports when it comes to games like Minecraft and Rocket League. That's also accessible in multiple platforms. But, it gets a little bit more difficult when you start looking at consoles and who has access to consoles, and, can schools purchase consoles, and any of these consoles, like the things that are allowed, are they being monitored through third parties, just in case, so that there's no information of students being, disseminated within these consoles and stuff like that. So all those things is something that you definitely have to take into account.
So addressing Philip's comment here, he's pointing at Overwatch as being something interesting. And I actually want to take what everyone is saying here a little bit deeper around just this concept of really connecting with your community in particular. JD, you mentioned a survey. So I'm curious, from the NASEF side, we always advocate for, when you're starting a program, to really connect with the students and young people and understand where their interests are. Is it casual? Is it competitive? So things like that before you make the decisions into how you're going to design your program. Because at its core, NASEF's approach has always been based on student and young people's interests. So really starting with that same fundamental philosophy with the program development as well. So I'm curious just to hear from you all, what was your process in maybe understanding the context of your community prior to making these decisions around game titles and how you wanted to design your program?
I could definitely say, for me, that when I sent out a survey to my students and asked them what type of games they played, what they liked to see in school and things like that. And for the majority from middle school to high school, 'cause I'm a 6 to 12 school, everyone was interested in Modern Warfare and all these types of games. And they're just like, but I play it all the time. I play it at home and my parents let me, but it's just like, it's one thing you can do things at home. It's different when you're in a school environment. These games are, are a little bit controversial. So it's like, you're not old enough. They say it's M for mature, but you're 11, you're 12, and you shouldn't be playing these games. But or it's suggested that you shouldn't be playing these games. So these not games that I can bring into the school for you to play. I can tell you many of my students were not interested in Rocket League when I set it out there, and they're just like, oh, we don't play that. I used to play that. I'm not interested. But then, you start having tryouts. Nobody wants to show up. You get the 5 or 6 kids. And then when they see the kids starting to play, they walk by their room, they see them in there, and they see their posters up and their games or an announcements all of a sudden is generating an interest of kids who are like all the way up to seniors going, well, I used to play Miss. I can play. I can totally come in here and cook these kids, or however they like to say it. And you're sitting there going, well, where were you when the announcements, the paperwork, the flyers, the everything, the 6 months of me begging was going around? So I think it's like, kids are going to tell you one thing, and it's going to be difficult because the games they want, like I said, Call of Duty, it's kind of like, whoa, that's a doozy, right? Like that's a game that you really have to worry about. But eventually you start exposing them to the ones that you do want, or the ones that you can be permitted to have in your program. And eventually they'll come around because they see, the fun, they see what they used to do. They remember that feeling. So they'll come around to that eventually.
Yeah, I kind of want to think a little bit about what Philip was asking. Like, how do you balance the demand for the shooters that are at the collegiate level? Like, one of the biggest challenges that we see is what Scholastic and high school is doing not lining up as strongly with what the collegiate space is doing. And that's been happening a lot. So I feel like it's just really difficult, and that push has to come from, if it's not coming from grassroots and if that's not getting changed at the school site level, it has to come from, the collegiate space pushing this down and making it something more acceptable for the high schools to be like, hey, you're good to play Overwatch and Valorant. This is what we're recruiting for. I think advertising that would be how they'd kind of balance that. But Philip, what you're saying is right. It is hard to match what the collegiate space is doing with what is okay and acceptable in schools.
And parent buy very important. So you always have that, like one of the things it says at Rocket League, even though it's E for everyone, this new season, the snow day, is 13 and over. So you have to send out parent permission slips and ask them if they're okay with their kids participating in this. So parents have a lot of voice. So if you end up having a conversation, a connection with parents, and explain things, and even if themselves is like, I would like my child to be able to participate in these things, you'd be surprised how, with the support of parents, how far you can really push the ability to play these games that the collegiates are asking for.
The parent push can get a lot of things approved.
We do play Overwatch and Valorant. We played Halo this year at the high school level, but we have had collegiate coaches tell us that they don't recommend us having our high school players playing rated M games like Call of Duty, Siege, those kind of games. They think it's better that we keep them on the rated T games. So I feel pretty comfortable that we're doing the right thing with that.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't touch any rated M games. Just to kind of give an idea of the game titles that were sort of approved here, I'm out in California, and what NASEF is doing with the California Interscholastic Federation, they're essentially the governing body for high school athletics, and they have a board approval process where the 3 game titles that they approved were Rocket League, League of Legends, and Super Smash Brothers. And out of those 3 games, Rocket League is the most accessible by basis of being free and cross-platform, which I think is why it has such a huge following, is that anybody can pick up the consoles. League of Legends struggles with being a PC-based game and the requirements for technology being a 5-person game. But surprisingly, our most popular title is Super Smash Brothers. California's got 180 teams that are playing Super Smash Brothers right now. And the nice thing is that it's accessible in the sense that your school just needs a single console. So adding that sort of tech access and the ease of just plug and play, other than the network side of things, is kind of huge. Yeah, I can't say plug and play without dealing with the firewalls.
Yeah.
So we're naturally progressing through our conversation here. I think Pamela and James, you both kind of addressed my next question. Is really, what has been the feedback from stakeholders? I mean, obviously, James, you're working at a statewide level, working with stakeholders at that level, and then everyone here is working at different levels. So I'm just curious to hear, as you make these game titles, whether it's parents, administrators, or other community members that are involved in your initiative, what has been the feedback, and are they potentially, like you all were alluding to, included in that game title selection process?
Well, I could speak for New York and New York City, actually. As progressive as we are, New York City is completely the opposite when it comes to esports. And I would tell you that when it comes to having the buy-in to try to be able to be part of something like this is very difficult in the administrative level. And one of the things that they're only interested in at the moment and will allow is Minecraft, because the NYCDOE has had or has currently a partnership with Microsoft. So they're working on things like that. And we just officially got the gaming tech that is now on the shopping website for schools to be able to use. But I'm gonna be honest with you, my administrator himself was all for our students being able to play anything and everything. It's just, it's being able to have access to ports and things like that we have to go through, the IT department within the DOE that makes it a bit difficult. And one of the pushbacks we've gotten is they won't allow a Twitch, access. They won't, unless there's like an educational version. They wouldn't allow even Super Smash Brothers, surprisingly, is the one game. They'll allow Valorant, they'll allow all these other games, but Super Smash Brothers will not be allowed unless I was told Nintendo decides themselves to create a console that is educationally based, that it's monitored I'm monitored through third party, programs within the NYCDOE. So, unfortunately, the game that's the most popular, which is Super Smash Brother, is the one game where the kids won't be able to play online and have that access, unfortunately. But again, it's a lot of pushback, it's a lot of conversations, a lot of support, and as long as you have certain people like parents and administrators within your building who are working and trying to support, we find other means and other ways to be able to try to move forward with the program, because it's what the kids really need and want, and it's the next evolution in education.
Well said. Well said.
I think that might be the good thing about being in the elementary middle school space, is we don't have those organizations like that we kind of have to jump through to get stuff going. So really, like, that's one of the reasons that we started the Western Region Middle School Esports Conference, is to find other people to play against. And we kind of chose the games that best fit our programs and the ones that other people were playing. And parents have been great with it. Like, I feel like we're at a time in the elementary middle school space, especially, like, parents are at the age where they also grew up with games and online games.
Hey.
So I hear a lot like, oh, I wish that we had this when I was growing up, sort of a thing. And they don't see it as the same like isolationist activity that people like my age and older might see it as, because the first games I can remember playing online were like cribbage and chess on Yahoo, like not something where you're actually like talking to the people and doing things like that. So they see it as more of a way to just like build those relationships, build those friendships than it was before.
Shout out to all the gamer parents out there.
Yeah,
I know, right? So yeah, I'm a parent of a gamer. I have a 7-year-old gamer, and then my oldest kiddo plays games too. Like, I'm looking at what Heather said about, like, it's super important to teach like what you're going to teach. And I've had this conversation with so many teachers that is like, if you look at the floor of what an esports program is, and the only thing you're getting out of it is giving your students a team-based competition to participate in, that can be enough, because they will learn so many soft skills without having to go into the broadcasting side of things. I mean, I have a group of students that I have had them for 3 years now, going 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And I have just seen insane amounts of growth in their own personalities and just in how they regulate themselves. I've seen them become better winners. I've seen them become better at losing. And if that's the only growth that I get out of them with my program, I'm content with that.
Yeah,
Leadership and communication skills are, I mean, that's huge what they pick up because they have to lead, they have to communicate. It's big.
Yeah, I don't really correct kids when they think that they're just coming in to play games, because that gets them in the door. And then once they're in the door, like all of those other things happen. Like, it's super hard to be toxic when the person's sitting next to you. It's hard not to figure out how to control your emotions when there are other people watching those emotions and like trying to talk you through it, trying to either talk you down or talk you up, depending on where you're at. And like I said, our parents that are involved and our administration that's been involved have been super happy to help with it and just see all of the different things that the students are doing when they just thought they were coming in to play games. So we have kids streaming, we have kids creating graphics, we have all of these other things that are happening that aren't them just playing the game.
Definitely think that's super important. I mean, NASEF is always advocating for the implementation of the esports ecosystem model across all of our programs. So being inclusive of all of those various career pathways that are present within the industry beyond the traditional player, professional player, and the games. So interestingly enough, and I've actually posed this question to our global community. We're here having a conversation around game titles, but we are kind of US locked in this conversation. Unfortunately, it'd be nice to have some of our global friends join in, because it looks very much different on the international stage, I will say. In particular, some of the universities abroad, as well as, NASEF was involved recently with our partners at IESF with the World Esports Championships, which had a completely different set of game titles that are not typical, at least within the US space. I think my observation, at least globally, mobile gaming seems to be much bigger in terms of at least Scholastic Esports. So I'm curious just what you all have maybe heard or thought of as you're engaging in these global conversations with educators around the titles that they're playing and choosing.
So I think bringing in some of the mobile games is a lot bigger of a deal than some of us realize, mostly because the number of students that have access to just a phone or a tablet that can play some of these mobile games is getting up there. Like, it would be really cool to see, like, the mobile version of, I think, League of Legends, like the Wild Rift is mobile version. Like, it'd be interesting to see that come to mobile. I know that we had a pretty good Brawlhalla season with our middle school program. It wasn't the biggest, but it was still players of, teams of two getting in there and playing. I know that our program itself, like, we moved our plan to play a new title coming out, or one that's already been out, Omega Strikers, to later because it was going to come out on mobile and we wanted that accessibility. So I think looking at what the rest of the world is doing is important, but I also think that the US still has a decent amount of catching up to do with regards to how esports is being perceived. There's a lot of other nations where it's more, I'd say, culturally accepted, and that it's seen more as a viable career path. And so I think that through change here, that's what's going to, drive that change. It just has to take time.
What are your other thoughts around kind of culturally appropriate game title choices? I'm happy to add some other observations as well with some of the engagements I've had. Shout out to our friends in Indonesia at the Indonesian Esports Federation. They've had an interesting, obviously, just like James was saying, around the government sort of approving and being accepted of the esports space. They also have regulations in place that actually control what game titles are played within the country around esports, which is intriguing. I haven't seen that before. And in particular, they also have multiple initiatives that are supportive of local Indonesian game developers for their titles to also be considered to be competitive esports titles within the country. So very intriguing. Obviously, our friends in South Korea have had the longest trajectory around esports, and their game title choices also are heavily influencing the rest of the world as well. But in general, yeah, I will say mobile gaming is a huge opportunity, not just for the international space, but specifically for the US space because of what you all are saying around access, because they have mobile devices. I think of some of our friends in India, for example. Most of their gamer population is based primarily in the mobile space. Game titles like Call of Duty Mobile are obviously popular. Maybe not necessarily appropriate for the Scholastic space.
Okay, so
yeah, please.
I've got something to add on that as well.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
the Call of Duty is good. One of the things that we talked about is equity and access. And one of the issues that we ran into this year with starting some mobile gaming is mobile games that are specifically designed as pay to win in some element or other. So one of the titles that we looked at and that we had a push from students, they were saying, hey, can we do a Clash Royale game or they wanted to do Clash Royale, I believe it was. And when we were looking into it, and JD, correct me if I'm wrong, it was Clash Royale that we had, and then
I think so.
had to pull. So we looked at game titles that were essentially, we thought, oh, it's free to play, it's accessible. And then one of our teachers dove into the weeds on what the game was and found that it contained pay to win elements. So I think that is sort of a regulation side of things. When you mention that the other governing bodies are regulating what makes a game title pay or, acceptable, I think a big part of this conversation is it has to be free of elements that give you an advantage if you spend more money on the game. So I'd say looking at titles that are, if the only thing you're paying for is cosmetics or the appearance of the game, that definitely adds to its accessibility in the eyes of the, esports and Scholastic land.
Yeah, and so many students do have mobile devices, so that equity and access is there, but also the data, being able to connect to data. Like a lot of school districts, mine included, and I completely understand why and agree with it. Like students don't connect their own devices to our network. So having them get to be able to, and a lot of my students that have their own phones, or they don't really like play games when they're not connected to Wi-Fi at home, just because of the cost that might incur, or it'll just kind of slow down their other data access. So yeah, it's great to have those mobile games and have those mobile options because, like we said, so many more students have access to those devices. But then you also have to factor in, like, can they actually access it when they're not at home or they're not at a place that has open Wi-Fi? And my IT department's been incredibly great in getting everything set up. So I just want to shout out, if you're starting a program, your IT people should be your first people you talk to after you kind of get a go ahead from your administration or whoever the head of your organization is, just to see, like, hey, can we get this to work? What do we need to get it to work? Because it's not something that is just like flip a switch and it can all work. There's definitely some trial and error, figuring out what can work, what can get through the network. So talk with your IT people to get access to on whichever devices you're going to be playing the games on.
Amy, did you want to jump in and add, please?
The pay to win and the access to the network are definitely good points. The counterpoint to that I would have is that a lot of my students that are coming to esports specifically to play games on PC that they're not able to play at home because they don't have the equipment, they don't have the graphics cards, they don't have the internet for their computers to be able to play it. When I ask them about mobile games, they're all playing those at home. They can all play those together. They've been playing them together at home, and I didn't even realize it. So I think there's a flip side to that equity. I mean, there's pros and cons to it, absolutely, but there's also the flip side that those are the games the kids are already familiar with. So, there's the pro. They get to come play games they're not familiar with at school, but then there's also, they're already comfortable and can dominate with some of the ones they're playing at home, which my district, a lot of students don't have a lot of money, so they aren't able to compete necessarily with some of the wealthier districts. So that's exciting for them.
It's also rules, like for example, for me, I know that I don't really delve into mobile games, but I also look at it as some of the organizations that we participate in to have these tournaments. They already have countless of datas and hours of information, and they tell you, when you're playing certain games, like these are the basics and the default settings that you should have. And when it comes to these mobile games, it's not something that it's kind of new to a lot of people, especially into the realm of esports. So it's just like finding, do you connect to UGC? Like what are the kids connecting to set up their tournament or anything like that? And then when they do, it's like, how do you catch someone from not cheating? I know if you have an Android device, it's a lot easier for you to be able to tweak and get certain things. So it's like, how do you know someone it has a leg up on you, or someone's doing this or that? So it's a lot harder to, I would say, maybe I could be completely wrong, possibly catching anyone having a leg up in a game, and also like rules of like what are the default settings and what are the things that you should follow to be able to do that on a mobile device. But I would say that that's just the only thing I may find to be like sort of a caveat, but that's about it.
Yeah, I'd say also games that you can use that are limiting the amount of interaction between students. I know that there are games that are emote only, which feel a lot safer, where you don't have to worry about like an open chat line or an open voice call, something to that effect. I know that some games like that, implement that feature, and all of a sudden it's really scary. I know that when Rocket League came out with the, always on voice comms or whatever it was, that was a big like whoa, careful moment.
So we tried to make this a simple answer, but as you can see, it's not so simple. There are very, very different perspectives and obviously points to consider depending on the context of your situation, your culture, what's appropriate, not appropriate, what's approved, not approved. So we really just wanted to spend time kind of diving into all of those different variables to explore really what it takes. So if we were to wrap all of that into maybe a nugget, just to say, okay, start here, what would be kind of your base point that you would recommend? Because obviously you can get lost down the rabbit hole of considerations. So if you were to say to someone that's completely new, start here, what would you tell them?
Start short and sweet. The data never lies. Start with a survey. Simple as that.
Ask your kids. That's where you need to start.
And probably start with a club instead of jumping into competitive, because you're going to get a lot of kids that they don't want to compete. They want to play the games with their friends. They want to just kind of hang out and play. And then you'll see which kids do want to play competitively, and you kind of branch off into two separate things. Two separate kind of programs, basically. The kids that want to hang out with their friends, and then the kids that want to play competitively against schools around them or around the world.
So that's actually a great segue into the next point I wanted to dive into. So we've spent a lot of time considering kind of the competitive landscape, looking at selection of game titles. But like you said, James and JD, right, there's a differentiation around casual and competitive in a lot of ways. So let's talk about the casual side. Let's dig into, really what it is around building community, essentially what we're doing here. What are some of those game titles that you utilize within your programs to help kind of build that casual and more hangout space that we like to see?
My kids that wanted to do casual, the ones that compete, they love D&D, so that's their casual thing they play. They like to play a few other games together, but D&D is their big thing. They get off the computer for the most part, and they have fun.
And for the non-native, D&D is Dungeons and Dragons, just to clarify, but yes.
It's okay. Stranger Things made that a household name. Nobody's allowed to not have that anymore in their vocabulary. So I started off in this whole space. I don't have 8 years of esports history there, Ms. Harris, but what I did have was I was I was the teacher that ended up sponsoring / founding a gaming club at a high school level. And so my gamers there started off as it was a hybrid video game club and board game club. And what we did to kind of build that community is we had a group of students we had 3 groups that were kind of like factions, if you will. We had a large group of girls and 2 boys that were playing D&D, and they ran a like 3-year-long campaign in the libraries on Friday after school. And they continued it in the summers, and they all got together and made friends. And one of the girls there started off DMing her sophomore year and was going through her senior year. So we had a D&D crew that did a lot of storytelling. We had a group that liked to show up and play Smash Brothers. And at the time, we were okay to play Call of Duty Zombies. So they played that as kind of a really fun event. So they did a lot of Smash Brothers. They would actually just throw 8 people into an arena on the library projector and call it good, as well as tournaments. And then we had a large group that played Magic the Gathering. So we had a group that played Magic the Gathering in like 4-player Commander games, and they would play Fridays, and it was super duper cool. So on game days, we had kids that would show up for like Saturday tournaments, and we had a group that would come in the morning at like 8 a.m. and draft Magic the Gathering, and then at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we'd switch over and start playing Super Smash Brothers as a tournament. So they started with these kind of community-based games that were all like team-based. Smash Brothers was not as team-based, but it was still, a lot of hype, a lot of energy in the room. That was kind of how they started and how they kept it going.
Yeah, I would say Smash Brothers for ours is the one, because I kind of force my kids to play Rocket League because that's what we're competing in. But Smash Brothers is great because you can get 8 players playing at one time on one device if you have enough controllers. So it's really like you can get as many kids playing. I don't know any other game that you can get more people playing on one device at one time. So it's really fun to have all those people playing like right next to each other and all in the same place. All my Rocket League players are always like, can we play Smash now when we're running a competitive practice? So it's definitely something that they're into.
I would say the same for us. Smash and Mario Kart. Some of the games that I just, have the kids play, and that's what they enjoy as their leisure time. It's just want to relax. They want to play that. I do have during the school day, during lunch period, when the kids can come up and play, you can play the competitive games, but you're not playing it in a competitive mindset. You will play your individual Fortnites, or you'll play your individual Rocket League matches, but you're not playing as a group. You're there to have fun. And they know during that time, it's not like, hey, let's do this and that. It's just a fun time. And kids know how to turn it off. They switch off and they're just like, I'm just here to enjoy my time. And then after school, it's game mode. Let's figure out what I need to do.
Yep. It's the casual fun that those are. Like the Smash Brothers, like casual, like Saturday tournaments or fun events, like that brings in so many kids that you wouldn't expect. And it's fantastic.
Yeah, shout out to the Smash community. I feel like they're the best representation of the community-driven types of initiatives that we love seeing. It's all about just hanging out and playing together. So,
and it brings in a lot of it does bring up an equity thing though, because there are free-to-play fighting games out there, or that are more accessible, but at the same time, like those games don't end up with the same level of popularity. Like I've had people who recommended, just different fighting game titles. And they're like, oh, there's a fighting scene here. I know we've got somebody in the YouTube chat that is like a fighting game guru who can chime in on like the, bringing all the fighting games to Southern California. But Smash Brothers is not the only game. It just seems to be the one with the most saturation, I guess.
Do you think part of that is maybe because, I've been playing Smash since it came out in the late 90s. So these kids, their parents all played Smash. And so it's something they played with in their families since they were little. And it just keeps evolving into new Smash games. And I think they've just grown up with it. And that's what makes it such a popular thing for a lot of kids in my group anyway.
Yeah, I play Smash Brothers with my 7-year-old. She loves it. And yet I've got a high school locally that said they wouldn't approve it because there are characters with guns.
Yeah. I'm going to be playing Smash till I'm 90.
There is, as you say, a generational divide
Yeah.
between those that make the rules and those that are in the trenches.
Hmm. And one other popular game is the Jackbox games. Hey,
Oh, those are
man, that's
great
how
for
it started
adults.
off. The Jackbox games, that's the hook and the stinger. That's the one that just brings everybody in to just casually be on the phone, and then from there they look over and it's like, well, let me introduce you to this, and then what's that? And like, there's this game. So, I mean, Jackbox was what helped me bring in a lot of kids first.
Yeah, it's fun to have some of those casual games that are just more. I kind of have gamified stuff that I do in my math class with game programs called GimKit is a really popular one. That's like the best version of Kahoot to ever exist. I'll get on the rabbit hole of plugging that if we go too far, so I'll stop right there.
You should put that in the chat so I can look at it.
I will put GimKit. I will shout GimKit from the rooftops.
Jarrell, that's where you started. You started with us when we had our fellows meetings. It was Jackbox games, right? That's why I got all of us like after a day of teaching or doing everything, everybody's decompressing through the Jackbox games. Actually,
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's just great overall from a community perspective. I do want to plug one of the projects. JD, I know you've been working on this for quite some time, specifically around community game nights. So tell me more.
So I think it's been about 3 years now, close to 3 years. We've been running community game nights on Fridays. And this is one that we play outside of school. So it is a T-rated game. So we play Fortnite mainly because with the custom lobbies, like it's the easiest one to get a whole bunch of people into that I've found. Because I have kids ask, hey, can we play Roblox? Can we play Call of Duty? And I'm like, you might be able to. I don't know how to do that to get as many people involved. So with Fortnite, yeah, we play on Fridays. It's really open to anyone. We have our staff members play. We have students play. We have people that I went to high school and college with jump in and play, and their kids play. We run it almost every Friday that we have school. We get some weeks there's 25 players in there. Some weeks there's 85, 95, up to a full lobby. It just kind of depends on what's going on where. But like I said, it's all from home because it's a T-rated game. So it's really up to parents to decide if that game is right for their child. Like I know we've had second graders play, and I know we have families with kids that are in 8th grade high school that don't think Fortnite is right for their kids to play. So it's really just open to everyone. And we started adding Fall Guys recently because that's another one that you can add. I think it's up to 60 people in at once. So we've been running Fortnite and Fall Guys, community game night Fridays for quite a while now. That's why I have all this different stuff, background that showed up, or a microphone arm in front of me just to kind of make it easier as we run that.
that has definitely become my goal for 2023 to hopefully acquire a creator code. Crossing fingers that they open it up again.
Yeah, I think it's closed right now, but they usually do open it. And there are some, it's kind of tough to get in. There are some different things that you have to be able to get it. But once you get it, it's really easy to just start that game. You make a password protected lobby, and everyone has to be in the same region as you on the game and put the password in. And they're able to jump in and all kind of play together. And there's always problems. Like I mess up with it all the time. This last Friday, so Tyler Hahn, the director of the Cherokee Public Library, is there almost every week doing this with us. And I had his microphone muted for the whole first game. And I'm talking to him. He's talking back to me. I completely forgot to turn his microphone on. So, and you can mess, and like the kids aren't watching it to watch us stream the game. They're watching it to get the code to get in and play. So I could just turn it off and they'd be okay with it too. So, but yeah, it's definitely fun. My whole esports program started because I was trying to find ways to get kids into being able to like public speaking and broadcasting. I started streaming our spelling bees at my school. And then I'm like, how could I get kids into this? And what could we do to get them to be able to do this? And gaming was kind of an easy lift for that. Like you're going to have someone talk about the game while they play it. And then you see as Twitch is insanely popular online. YouTube Live, insanely popular online. Like there are bunches of people doing it, and kids are interested in doing it. It's a way to bring them into getting to be able to be comfortable talking in front of an audience or a perceived audience. And then there's just all the different technical skills that go along with it. But yeah, our community game nights have been, I'd like to say they're popular. Like I said, sometimes there's 15, 20 people. I don't feel like it's as popular when we had 85, 95 the week before, but it kind of runs depending on the season, where it's warm at, where it's cold at, who shows up, who has outside sports. So it's really just open, like anyone can jump in if it fits for them.
That's great. Thanks, JD. So we got maybe about 10 minutes till the top of the hour here. So I do want to maybe ask, because we've really hit a lot of these different questions. And again, just like we're all saying, start small, start with the young people and students, understand where they're at and what they're interested in, and then grow from there. So maybe we can spend these next 10 minutes just getting into the feels, sharing some success stories from our programs. And since we're talking about game titles, maybe something within a game that you've seen a student or young person grow in. And it can be in whatever aspect, whether it's social, emotional, academic, even more technical. I'd love to hear some of your stories.
You're muted, James. James, you're still muted.
Yep, James.
When did I get
There you
muted?
go. See, that happens all the time.
That was me.
Forget
We
to
just
turn it
talking
on.
about that.
I was probably typing in the other window and got muted. Thanks, Bradford. Behind the scenes muting. So I want to say my success story that is a weird success, not success, is I teach middle school, and I had students last year who were successfully broadcasting Rocket League games. One of my successes with the kids was I had a kid who say, "Oh, I'm really interested in shoutcasting. Let's do this." And he showed up to the esports room after school. We had a game going into their school. He got behind the camera. He sat down. He's like, "Oh, cool. We're live on Twitch." And then he looked at me and says, "What do I say?" He had no knowledge of Rocket League whatsoever. He'd never seen a game, didn't know anything about it, but wanted to shoutcast. And by the end of the hour-long stream, he was actually doing a fairly respectable job of explaining what was going on. And, he got some coaching through it. It's like, hey, talk about what you're seeing. What does it look like the players are doing? Like, explain some things here. And with some help, he was talking by himself. And I can always jump to that replay, which is pretty cool. So that was a success story. And then two of my kids that came back this year, their first questions were not about what games we're playing. It was, when can we start broadcasting?
Wow. That is a great success.
I have kind of a similar but backwards story from that. I was panicking a little bit because I didn't have casters for our varsity Smash solo finals last fall for MOSEF, and I was standing there watching my kids play, and we had another school that was playing in our building because their internet was not sufficient for them to play from their school. They were standing behind me talking about the game they were watching, and I was listening to them and turned around and said, "Do you guys want to cast the finals?" And they were like, "Sure." And they were amazing. They were so good just because they're natural talking about the game. So that was really cool.
Nice. Well, I can go. This year, it's the first year that the esports team has actually participated in a tournament. So it's actually one of those things that we're happy about. It's middle school students, which is I thought I would never try the younger kids, but they actually seem to be the most rewarding in terms of feelings when they win and when they're all excited. But like I did state earlier, I have a WLG, which is a work-learn group, and these are students who get paid to do certain jobs. And my students, they're working on the NASEF ecosystem. So they are creating the content for us. They're shoutcasting, and they're trying to manage, our team and do graphic designs and kids' photos and posters and all of that. So it's having these two different entities happening at the same time, and it's just great to see. So I would say that's my little amount of success that's taken years to build, but it's still a work in progress. But I'm just happy to see, the momentum and in the long term how sustainable it would be.
don't sell yourself short. That's a huge success. I mean, these kids are getting paid to do this work. I will say, for one,
Minimum
I've never
wage.
heard of anything like that. So
They're getting minimum wage and like 15 hours a week, actually. So
yeah,
that's not bad.
it's not bad. Not bad.
I think, well, all kids play games. So you'll have those kids that have been in competitive sports. And then you'll have those kids that aren't, or kids that really don't. We kind of all have this story at some point, right? Like a kid that wasn't really involved in anything else. And then just being able to be involved in, with mine, it's a competitive, like we run our Rocket League practices like a practice, the same way I ran basketball practices, the same way I ran baseball practices, like the same structure. Um, you definitely notice like the kids that haven't been in that sort of a structure before, but that's early on in the year, and you definitely see those kids that are able to just kind of find a group of other students that have something that's the same interest as theirs, even if they're a kid that plays soccer or a kid that plays baseball or a kid that doesn't. You kind of just bring different groups together because what is it, like 90% of all teenagers have played a game in the last week, sort of a thing. Like, so yeah, just bringing those groups together. I know we all end up with those stories, those kids that have never been on a team before or never really like had something that they felt like they excelled in an after school or in school situation.
So
exciting.
Please.
When I first started, my kids would not go with me to the student involvement day to set up the table because they were like, no, people are going to make fun of us because we're gamers. And now all the kids are like, yeah, we game. So I think that's really come a long way. And we're still providing a place for those kids to participate when they don't participate in other things. But I think it's much more accepted now than it was when it first started, which is wonderful.
Just checking the chat here. We have a lot of really interesting topics that we could probably spend an entire podcast on. But just shout out to our community for all of the interesting conversation points and questions that you're bringing in. We have a few minutes here. Any maybe other stories or thoughts or maybe questions you've seen in the chat that I may have missed that we want to address?
There was a question in the chat way earlier. And I guess since we just highlighted this, I'll talk about that real quick. Somebody had mentioned getting Discord approved. It's very, very tough sell to get districts to be okay with Discord because of the open nature of it. I will say that, Philip, I'm going to echo exactly what you say here with kids that are struggling socially, really coming out of their shells with regards to esports. I have heard so many testimonials of kids who we had a school who just started locally here about 40 minutes south of us and said, I have a kid that has been nonverbal in my class for 2 years, and she came in at lunchtime to play Smash Brothers, and I heard more words out of her in that one lunch period than I did in the last 2 years of the student being in my class. Granted, they were using them to trash talk, but seeing the kids come out of their shells in any capacity is huge, especially the ones that might not otherwise be comfortable participating in a traditional athletic endeavor.
I could tell you, I'm a middle school special education teacher. I teach self-contained, so most of my students, or a lot of the students involved in my program, are students that are have disabilities. And I'm be honest with you, it was a way to get my students to connect to other kids, those who never really join and participate in things or having relationships with others that they normally don't. So I could tell you, this community is big and we are pushing forward, and we have a lot of new fellows this year that has been the focus. A lot of them is the Special Olympics and things like that. So I encourage you to even look into what some of our fellows are doing this year as well.
I think a challenge that a lot of people have is thinking like they need to know a lot about the games, or they need to know a lot about how to set all this stuff up. And we're all people that have experience, like Amy, 8 years, Pamela, you said 4 years, James, 4 or 5 years. Like that's a lot of experience. We've made a lot of mistakes while doing it, but we all kind of started in the same place. Like we just were like, hey, this is kind of something that will fill a need within our community organization. And we found someone to jump in. So feel free to jump in. Your kids will know more about the games than you do. Like Pamela, you talked about playing Smash until you're 90. I can't get it. I don't, but that's the game the kids all want to play, like, or League of Legends. No idea what's going on. I have zero clue. Zero clue.
But the kids love to teach you.
Yeah, exactly.
They love to beat
So,
you.
yeah. But really what your school or maybe your community organization wants or needs is a caring adult in the room. Like, because you're going to do the same things that you do in your classroom. You're going to set up the same, the same, you're going to provide the same examples. You're going to provide the same structure, but be okay with feeling like you don't know what's going to go on when you get in there, and just plan for that. And like everyone here said, like, talk to your students about what they want to have, but be okay with not being the expert, because you're not going to be. Be okay with not being the expert in the room when you get started.
Yeah, we're the experts when it comes to the stakeholders. We know how to navigate them. The kids are the experts in the games. Every Monday at a certain time, I have meetings with students who are teaching me how to play Minecraft, because it is one game that really just goes over my head. I don't understand how people can understand that game, but you know what? That's what you do. You let the kids guide you. They are willing, just like Amy said, they are willing to teach you. They love it, and they were willing to beat you. They want to do it as well.
So what a great way to bring it home. Amy, sorry, were you going to jump in there? Okay. What a great way to bring it home. I appreciate those thoughts. I mean, ultimately, just like you said, JD and Pamela, we're educators first, and we know how to be educators. So continue doing that amazing work, and really just connect with your kids and understand where they're at, because they know the games. They'll help you navigate the games. And like James said, they'll enjoy beating you at the games, but that's all part of the community that we're building. So we are at time. I appreciate all of your thoughts and energy around this space. Obviously, this is only the tip of the iceberg. There's so many different opportunities and connections and conversations we can have around implementing Scholastic Esports. So I encourage you to tune into our next podcast in about a month or so. Check the schedule. We'll have it posted. Again, thank you everyone for joining in. Thank you to our audience, and we hope we'll see you next time. So please enjoy your evenings, your mornings, your nights, wherever you're at around the globe, and we will see you all soon. Bye, everyone.